Coogs House. We're number one, and we've played like it, and we've got a lot of work to do, but it's nice to finally play like it.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Cougs, a daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater can't stop by, please be sure to hit subscribe down below. Make sure you get the podcast in your feed each day, and we'd be happy to be your first listen of the day. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. It's nice to see you all again. Obviously, we've done this a number of times now, but we are giving away a Marcus Sasser t-shirt. We get 250 subscribers, so make sure you hit subscribe. And to be entered to win, you got to be leaving comments down below. So subscribe to get the subscriber count up, and then leave a comment down below to make sure you get a chance to win that cool Marcus Sasser t-shirt with like the old rock band kind of stuff looking thing. If you are looking for something to comment with, you don't have anything else to say, the question of the day today is, do you call it dressing or stuffing? Now, we're going to do a couple different things today. One, in the first segment, we're going to do some takeaways from the Norfolk State game. That's going to be one segment because it's a 48-point win, and it could have been more than that. And so we're going to try not to down talk Norfolk State too terribly much. We'll get things pulled from that game. Then the second segment, I want to look at two players that had big games in Norfolk State that, kind of because we're rotating guys through a 50-point win, I kind of had my eye on and may want to look and see what they do later. And in our third and final segment, make sure you stay tuned because I'm going to give you what I, at the moment, hope happens for the bowl game. There was some different, bowl projections leaked and this, that, and the other thing. We'll know a lot more about this time next week. But let's just say, got a favorite in mind. But the first segment, let's talk about some takeaways from the Norfolk State basketball game. Now, obviously, this is not, I guess Norfolk State could make the tournament, win the MEAC. They're currently atop the MEAC. And so I don't want to say they're not a tournament team and get people, we're always fine. They're not the same kind of tournament team that Oral Roberts or Texas Southern, or even to that degree that Kent State on Saturday was, right? So it's not quite the same kind of test. However, it's another coach that Sampson respects, and he does a lot of his non-conference scheduling with coaches he respects. So something to keep in mind, right? And B, I think that the thing to keep in mind here is that these are chances to practice and all good as is against, for lack of a better phrase, live bullets, right? See live reaction times with a crowd and officials and all those things in a way that you don't really get to do at practice, and kind of get to see real situations. Now, defensively, Houston was Houston, right? That part has never gone anywhere, frankly, the last couple of years. I guess I could say the whole time Sampson's been here, but certainly the last couple of years, right? Houston held Norfolk State to 35.1% shooting. They've been shooting 49% on the season. Most notably in that shooting jump shot category, Houston held Norfolk State to 5.6% from three. That's a real 3-point percentage they shot. They'd been shooting 38% from three on the season. So Houston made them dramatically more uncomfortable than they'd been to any point yet this year. And they've played Baylor. They've played some other Power 5 teams. I say other Power 5 teams. So they played some Power 5 teams. And Houston was able to kind of knock them out of all that. Houston also forced them to commit 16 turnovers. And I think that's important because that's kind of a constant for Houston's defense, the in your jersey aggressive half-court defense they play. And then Houston was able to out-rebound Norfolk State 40-28, kind of continuing that trend we saw them do over the weekend, when that was kind of the saving grace against Kent State that probably saved the game in a lot of ways for Houston. Worth pointing out, they won the rebounding battle 40-28. Again, Norfolk State had been getting more 36 and a change rebounds per game. And so clearly held Norfolk State below their averages. And again, Norfolk State has played a handful of Power 5 teams. And so it's not like those averages are just made against cupcakes, right? What was impressive tonight and nice to see out of Houston was the offense was back. And bluntly, in the post-game presser, Sampson said that they finally practiced offense in a way that they, after the Norfolk State game on Saturday, they spent both Sunday's practice and Monday's like walk-through, shoot-around type practice focused not exclusively on, but certainly very heavily on offense. And it showed, right? Like Houston, for all of its faults on Saturday's game, Houston was able to spitball out and find open shooters. They shot 10 of 18 for 3 in the first half, so came out hot. 26 assists on the games. They're finding guys for catch and shoot kind of movements. I think what's interesting here is like Norfolk State was not a solitary defense team, and by that I mean that they they came down sometimes in man, came down sometimes in 3-quarter press, they came down sometimes in zone, and Houston was able to diagnose and dissect all of it. Where we've seen Houston have trouble this year on offense is if you go zone and Houston's not shooting the ball particularly well, it had been producing problems because it's, they're not a giant team. For all of the things that Houston does very well, we're not huge, right? And so if we're not shooting the ball well to go over the top of the zone, we can't exactly get into the teeth of it in the same way that a team with a couple 7-footers could go high-low or whatever, right? However, obviously today, Houston did shoot the ball very well, and I think part of that was the constant movement. I know there's been a lot made in various content creators talking about Houston, about the illness that was going through the team last week. Bluntly, I kind of buy it after watching tonight, recording right after the game. I buy it after watching tonight because they just looked quicker, right? Like they're moving quicker, meaning that to me, that means on Saturday, they are probably breathing a little bit heavier or like kind of down on the cardio over the course of the week. And I don't think that's just Thanksgiving hangovers, right? Like I think that's really the illness that we keep hearing about. I also think it's like good to see that there was some allusion to Sampson said as much, I guess. Jarace Walker had a hamstring tightness on Saturday. He played today. He did have a wrap on it at one point, but game was pretty well in hand by then. We saw Jamal Shead, I believe, look like cramping up in the early part of the second half, and he was out there to finish the game. So, on the whole, they're still looking pretty healthy. Hadn't seen Ramon Walker. Ramon Walker, to be fair, I think got the worst of the illness bug, but we went around. That's all. Excuse me. Sorry. That's also why we saw Jamal Shead out there at the end of the game in like a 40, 50 point blowout. And so, that's the kind of game that was. Houston did set offensive records tonight. It was the most 3-pointers made in, most 3-pointers made in the Fertitta Center, not the most made in a game for the U of H ever, but the most made in the Fertitta Center. I think it's interesting, the Fertitta Center has got this like great student atmosphere vibe. Sasser and Tremont Mark were both very happy to talk about like how enthusiastic and like how they fed off the crowd tonight after the game was over. And so obviously that's like important, right? That's a big deal for Houston to be able to set records in that stadium. It's going to continue to be that kind of a year for the U of H. Not just every night is going to be a shooting night, but like we're probably going to hear the best XYZ in school history, best XYZ in Fertitta Center, those kinds of things over the course of the season. It just did a very, 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 very impressive performance for the Cougs. And if I were a betting man, I don't know what the line was on this game beforehand, but even for a blowout, winning by 48 points is incredible. And so I'm not a gambler, but I imagine they beat the over-under line, whatever they're trying to do. If you are a gambler or if you like placing sports bets, let me recommend betonline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional amateur league out there, from basketball, football, soccer. Team USA is moving on, right? Esports, whatever you want. We got it at betonline.net. If you love sports podcast, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. If you're listening to this, you might love sports podcasts. You can find those at betonline.net as well. We're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. You head to the website or use your mobile device today to learn more. Betonline.net is where the game starts. The game I'm looking at this weekend is the exciting 4:05 Eastern NFL game on Sunday night. It's like that perfect window in the middle of the day. Miami is heading to San Francisco to play the 49ers. Mike McDaniel going back to play against or coach against Mike Shanahan. You've also got a pair of great running backs. You got Tyreek Hill versus Deebo Samuel. You've got Tua versus Garoppolo. It's a ton of fun. There's a Bosa running around like a chicken's head cut off halftime anyway. Fun football game. They've got San Francisco favored at -4. I'm not going to give away too much of the spill about what our guest tomorrow is going to pick for that. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. But I am going to say I'm taking Miami to get it under 4. I'm not sure I'm going to take them in money line quite yet, but I am taking Miami to keep it under 4. I'm thinking this is a field goal kind of game. So that's where I'm putting my money, and I think you should too. I think you should do it at betonline.net. Now, if you look at standouts from the game, I think the most obvious one is going to be Sasser. Sasser finished with over 20 points, and frankly, could have had 30 if it's kind of game where he had to play a lot more of the game, right? I guess I shouldn't assume that. He played 27 minutes, had 25 points. I'm assuming if he got his normal 31 minutes, 32 minutes, he probably has 32 points or something like that. I don't mean to extrapolate. He shot 7 of 12 from 3, kind of got to a spot where he wanted to. I'm not going to go there, right? I'm not going to go to a starter for this. I'm going to big man JVA Francis. Now, JVA is young, right? And he's frankly always listening to older guys I don't know if you guys know a lot about Darius Bowser, but Bowser is a fifth-year senior, transferred into the U of H. He's on the bench, always in JVA's ear. You've got Jalen Roberts also coaching up always at practice and those kinds of things per all the reports. JV does not get a whole lot of minutes. He's typically a less than 13, 14 minutes per game kind of guy. And I think what's interesting here is okay, if I'm looking at flaws in this U of H team, I keep going back to size, right? If I'm going to beat U of H, it's going to be because I'm Purdue and I got the big Edie kid and I'm just pounding it inside, right? I think what's interesting here is that we saw tonight, or we saw in the Norfolk State game, I guess you're listening to this on Wednesday, the trick may be actually to get JVA more minutes in those kinds of games. And he has trouble with these smaller run and gun type teams. He might not play a lot against the Alabamas of the world, right? But against teams that are slow it down, ground and pound kind of stuff, I wonder if JVA is the answer. And I wonder if JVA is the answer because for whatever reason, he seems to be if you multiplied his numbers out to a more normal rotation player, guy that played more minutes kind of guy, he's a walking double-double, right? In just 16 minutes on Tuesday night, 11 points, 8 rebounds, 3 blocks, 2 steals. Again, 16 minutes. To have that many blocks, steals, rebounds in 16 minutes, that means it's nearly every defensive possession you're touching the basketball, right? That's unreal to think about that in a Division I basketball game. Because it's a team that, again, I think might win the MEAC, might be a tournament team. JVA Francis is touching the ball in a possessive kind of way, not like a deflection or a bunch of tip back and forth or what. In a possessive kind of way, he's touching the ball nearly every possession, right? That's got to be infuriating for Norfolk State, right? This, to think about this, they pull in this guy off the bench that's 6'8", 235 with a 7'5" wingspan, and he can get on all those things. That didn't even account for the fact that he had a couple big dunks, a layup in transition, and a giant alley-oop, right? To kind of seal things off. And not that there was a dagger or anything in this game, but certainly felt like JVA's energy and enthusiasm was reciprocated by the fans as this kind of back and forth buildup, right? What I think the interesting thing there is that that high motor plus that height wingspan combination is probably Houston's best bet against these traditional bigs. I don't know if we'll see him against St. Mary's for the weekend. We have a preview on Thursday with Zach Farmer, who's a WCC and St. Mary's podcaster. He follows them very closely. He has for a couple years now. And so we'll get to talk to him some about their size and length. I don't know if they're quite, because they're 6'9" size. I don't know if that's quite the length that we need JVA Francis out there for. But I feel like we're underutilizing him in reference to when we see a 7-footer. And I wonder if we kind of continue to work him in over the course of these early non-conference games, if we get to Memphis down the road, or if we just get to play 7-footers in March. if we slowly start to realize like, oh, we might need to play, a giant lineup with like Jarace at the 3, Jawan Roberts at the 4, and all of a sudden you put JVA at the 5, and suddenly you're not looking like they're all 6'8", 6'9", right? But the wingspan you got going there, you can almost do the old like early 2000 Syracuse thing. We go like fingertip to fingertip, going back line across the baseline. I mean, you're talking about really, really long, lanky defenders. And then if you could put like, I don't know which point guard you would take out, Sasser or Shed, but if you put Tremont Mark out there as well at the 2, oh my God, you're a long, long team. Now I can't choose between Sasser and Shed as far as which one to give up. So I probably am benching Tremont Mark in this instance, but you got a chance to be really long. And I think that when you multiply that length in the back line, again, man-to-man defense, but that length at the rim with Jamal Shed and Marcus Sasser as the like upfront defenders, very, very suddenly, you have a real impactful defense that just kind of looks a lot different than we have thus far. The other guy I want to give credit to that doesn't get a whole lot of minutes, but I enjoy watching in Norfolk State, and I enjoyed watching him opening night against Northern Colorado, is Emmanuel Sharp. Now, I don't know if it's because I like the way Kelvin Sampson says the name Emmanuel, and so I just always recognize and like click and perk up when I hear him talk about him. But Sampson does talk about Emmanuel Sharp very well, like very, very highly. Emmanuel, you remember in our freshman preview, like me a long time ago at this point, is a coach's son. His father played overseas in Tel Aviv. Technically, I guess Emmanuel is Israeli, although his parents were both born in the States, right? So he's got dual citizenship there, but that's not really who are there. Emmanuel is a coach's son at heart and plays like it. Both parents were college athletes. He had a major leg injury his senior year of high school, and so he actually transferred in and got on campus early last January. And so he's kind of, I don't mean to like talk about weight, but kids gain weight when they get hurt, right? They can't, especially their lower body, they can't do cardio, can't run. And so he kind of has been continuing to like shed off that, extra weight, right? Because he got out of shape when he was hurt, and he's kind of still like, coming back, and being sick last week didn't help, and right? We've all been through that. However, Emmanuel, I think, is interesting to see, like, has a, for lack of a better phrase, hairline trigger when it comes to come in the game, pops up at 3. Like it's gonna happen. And I don't know that's necessarily Sampson's favorite thing to see. He went 1 from 4 in this game. But what I love about that is the confidence. And there's going to be a game, and it may be an important game, where in Emmanuel Sharp's 14 minutes, he goes like 4 of 6. Like he's got other point guard skills too. Again, the benefit to the big body is he like is very under control and in pace, and like keeps pace very well, and can get to the block and like get defenders in the air and get and ones and all those kinds of cool things. He was a tremendous 30-point per game scorer in high school. But this hairline trigger he's got going from the outside, I think will be really, really impactful in at least one important game. I don't know when it will happen, but at some point, like, Marcus is going to get in foul trouble. At some point, Jamal Shed's going to be there's going to be a ticky-tacky ref that's just like says Jamal Shed can't do all these things on defense. We got to find someone else to come in. And Ramon Walker is traditionally the guy that's been doing that. And Ramon Walker, admittedly, is a very good defender. But he's not quite the offensive guy that Emmanuel is. And I'm telling you, that's going to be important. And the continual, whenever Emmanuel shows up, shots get up. And he made a couple tonight, right? I guess he made 1 tonight. But when he comes in, shots go up. Like it's going to be important. It's going to be important in a big game. And just keep an eye on this kid. He's not the one and done that Jarace Walker is. He's not. I guess there's people. I read a thing today on Switch Theory. Go read Nemo on Switch Theory. There's a really good article about Terrence Arsenault. Could potentially be a one and done as well. He's not that guy either. He might be here a couple years. He's got something different in his offensive game, and so I'm sticking to it. And he might not. Something will happen with him important this year, and I'm keeping an eye on that. I really, really like what I see out of that kid. All right, I told you guys that in the third segment here, transitioning out of basketball, I talked a little about football. I should probably say that if you're a basketball junkie, hold tight. tune back in tomorrow. Subscribe down. Tomorrow we're doing a full St. Mary's preview, getting ready for the game this weekend with St. Mary's podcaster Zach Farmer. And then on Friday, I'm doing my own full preview to hear what I think, right? So like we'll talk all St. Mary's the rest of the week. But in this last segment today, I want to talk a little bit about football, although I'd actually probably rather talk about Jose Abreu coming to the Astros, but that's not this podcast, because it's coming up on bowl season. And frankly, there's like a bunch of projections about where Houston may end up in the bowls. And I already have a favorite because of who the potential opponent is. Because one of the ESPN.com projections has Houston going to as the American Athletic Conference representative to the Gasparilla Bowl. The Gasparilla Bowl is notably played in Tampa, Florida. Familiar with that from our time in the American. However, it's played in Tampa, Florida, and we get to potentially play Auburn again. Now, I like this matchup for a number of different reasons, but I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the chaos that is surrounding the Auburn football program currently. And frankly, I think that chaos would help out Houston in heading into an offseason where they're looking to join the Big 12 next season, right? Houston's going to have to hit the transfer window. I mean, we saw it on Tuesday. We saw Hudson Card is transferring out of the University of Texas at Austin. And there were people, and myself included, like, does he want to come over across I-10? Like, can we get him? Can we get him over here? Because frankly, like, he's a guy that we saw start games in the Big 12, knows getting to the Big 12, and he's not a bad athlete, and you can do some fun things with him in our offense, those kinds of things to impress those kinds of guys. Because Card is also looking like the Notre Dames of the world, right? To impress those kinds of guys, I kind of think Houston's got to play a Power 5 team in a bowl game. Houston's not going to get to go to New Year's Six Bowl as much as we wanted to, and I thought preseason we probably should have, and we're not. The chances to play Power 5s are getting increasingly slim, right? There's like which one's the one in Dallas? Like an Armed Forces Bowl or First Responders Bowl. There's one up in Dallas, not at Jerry World, but actually at Gerald Ford Stadium where SMU plays. So we're also familiar with that place. We'd be matched up with like Wyoming there, right? It's not really the same thing. Getting to play a Power 5 team would show off to transfer portal window kind of guys like, hey, it's happening before Christmas, so we could still be able to impress them before they committed in a transfer. And B, it's showing them like, hey, we're really able to do this, right? Like we really will be able to like come here, we'll be successful. We're building a program that can fit in with these Power 5 programs, right? I think that's important. And I think playing Auburn is important there. Playing Auburn specifically, not just because they're a Power 5 team, but specifically is because they have this giant mess happening. So they fired their head coach in the middle of the season and brought in Cadillac Williams to replace him for half the year. Now, Cadillac Williams is the same Cadillac Williams that played running back for them not all that long ago. Running back careers are short, so I guess in running back terms, it was a long time ago. But same guy, right? And frankly, everyone loved Cadillac. And this is not an Auburn podcast. You go check out Locked on Auburn. Zach does a great job. It's a really, really funny show. But at the end of the day, Cadillac was just a great guy that like kind of steered the ship until he got to the end of the season. They now are ditching Cadillac. So kids that like Cadillac, I would imagine, would sit out of this bowl game. They're bringing in Hugh Freeze and all the disgrace that he returned to the SEC with. Now, Hugh Freeze did get in trouble for a bunch of recruiting stuff at Ole Miss, and I guess technically some of that would be negated because rules about paying kids and contact, all that's changed, right? But also, you've got Google at your fingertips. He's not a great person, and I'll leave it at that. And there's a bunch of stuff and a bunch of mess around the fact that he's coming to Auburn, right? Auburn is a prestigious private university in Alabama. And frankly, there's a lot of people, like a lot of the fan base student body that are upset that they're getting this guy, right? They're not saying they didn't want to coach, but why are they getting this guy when they just had a guy like Cadillac that everyone loved and all of those kinds of things. And This Is Not Auburn podcast did a great job in live real time breaking down the signing of Hugh Freeze and those kinds of things on Locked On Auburn. So you can go check that out. That'll be my recommendation for a second listen, but I'm going to go through that right now. But getting to potentially catch that program in the Gasparilla Bowl with people transferring out and people upset about this and the attitudes being down could really help Houston, because Houston's had kind of this roller coaster up and down, playing to their competition kind of season all year long. And if playing a familiar Power 5 foe in a bowl game with their own turmoil going on, I think that's the kind of thing that could leap, a springboard Houston in this into the offseason. And frankly, it would need to be kind of a good offseason. And so I guess, call me overly hopeful, but I think that's the matchup I want right now. We'll see a lot more on Championship Sunday or Championship Saturday, and then leading to rankings coming out on Sunday. For all I know, TCU could blow it, and we're playing a Big 12 team or something, right? Maybe those opportunities arise. I'm not gambling on them though, and so we'll talk a lot more over the course of that. If you have other recommendations to me, or you want to talk more about what bowl games you want to see the Houston Cougars in, or you can be like, Parker, shut up, stop talking about bowl season. Let's talk more about basketball. You can find me on Twitter at Painsworth512. PAINSWORTH512. I talk all things Cougs, football, basketball, whatever. We're volleyball school. If you're not paying attention, we're really freaking good at volleyball. I also talk Rockets, Astros. I'll bemoan the Texans, but we can talk about them too. I also got a wall of sneakers behind me. I love talking about shoes, hip hop, South, whatever you want to talk about. So make sure you find me on Twitter, PAINSWORTH, Painsworth512. We'll talk all things you like to all the time. Thank you so much for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you did too. For a second listen, again, I'm telling you to go listen to Locked On Auburn to hear about the mess they're in, and frankly, to hope that we get to play them in the middle of that mess in a bowl game. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In our case, that means we're the number one team in the country every day. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. And last but not least, go Cougs.